about the friction. Now, what is friction? Friction is a force that if you pull the motion, the friction will be the opposite. If a motion is going on, the friction will be opposite. So, this is what friction. Let us get into the video to get more facts about the friction. So, let us get into the video. As you can see, here is friction object. Now, let us see what is friction. Friction is the opposite motion. If an object is in motion in this shape, the opposite direction is called the friction. It prevents what we are pulling. Now, types of friction: rolling friction, sliding friction, static friction, and fluid friction. Now, let us see the sliding friction. Now, sliding friction is where we slip in a slide. Now, static friction. When an object is applied to an object, if it doesn't move, means the correct angle isn't moved. So, for example, static is began and Bock kept the mountains, and because of the static friction holds in the place, it resists its sliding. Now, the sliding friction, the minimum required to make a body just to slide over the surface. For example, ice in a sliding, a person in sliding. It is also the less than static friction. It is rubbing of the bodies in the sliding contact, and the friction will be also very fast. More speed means more friction. Now, rolling friction. For example, example is a car within moving. What it occurs, the round objects such as ball or tire rolls on the surface. It is mainly deformation of the object. The deformation of the surface of them both. Rolling is much less than sliding because there are wheels added to every places. For example, skating shoes, cars, bus. Everything that has a rolling, that means rolling object, is called a rolling friction to prevent the friction. Fluid friction. Fluid friction is caused by something inflows in fluid. For example, liquid, gaseous, space and all. Fluids is like air and water. Air and the water are same only. It will be feeling like air and water only. Now, two forms of fluid friction. Now, static means there is a normal force, there is a friction, and there will be a gravity with no motion. With the motion means the motion is over here. Let me zoom in it. The motion is over here. The friction is in the opposite, then the gravity, then the normal force will be here. And this is called the sliding friction. Now, rolling friction means a rounder object. For example, a wheel. Let's take a wheel. The motion will be like this one to spin it around. The friction will be here and it will prevent the friction. This is called the rolling friction. Now, two forms of friction is air friction and viscous motion. Now, let me move to the next slide. Identify the types of friction. For this one, here is sliding friction. This is sliding friction. Sliding. Then here is rolling. And here rolling friction, then the viscous friction or the fluid friction, then the static friction, then the rolling friction. Now let me go to the next video, and the same is only here. This is called the static friction, then the rolling friction, and here is also the same, the rolling friction, then rolling friction. Then this is static friction, and this is also static friction. Then advantages of friction. For example, walking. While we are walking, the friction avoids over here. Stopping. To stop the car, we need friction. Then holding. We can hold using as the gravity goes over here. Our hand push it upwards, called the friction. Then writing. Then lighting a matchstick. Then fixing a nail on the wall. Now the disadvantages of the friction. The soles wear out, then the tires will bearing out while we run fast, then stone steps wearing out, then braking pad wearing out, and slows down speed as we goes. Then the friction causes heat. Now, friction is a necessary evil. Due to friction, the object is being placed and position and shape. In friction, there is a wear and tear of objects is allowed to parts to move, prevent with the moving of parts of a bicycle. Ways to increase friction. Friction is a thing that opposes the thing now. So we need. Why there is treads in tires? Treads in tires is for to reduce the friction because here's a roughing surface, so it prevents down the slope. Then studs, that means small holes in your shoes, mostly in football shoes and running shoes. You may like this. It will be to run very fast. That means it will take like that it just gets inside the ground and gives a better friction. Now let me draw and show you that. Now see, if a ball is going over here and see it is a ground. Now as the foot goes over here with the heels, what will happen means it will just get inside and it will give it in the shoe, it will be giving, and as it goes it will dig a hole over here. Then it gives a better friction to prevent slipping from the ground. So the football shoes and the running shoes will have this. Now the wiping a wet ball. Wiping a wet ball means it's a very if we put a wet ball means it will be very like this one. Let me draw it. It will be like this means, and if it like this means, as we rub it over here, it may prevents the air resistant and goes over fluently, and it may go fluently, and the ball will go very fast. Then grooves in the sole of shoes, the same only, like this and this are same only. Then kabaddi player wiping hands with sand. This may follow that if we rub our surface means our hand will become very rough. So what will happen means if we got someone, and it will never lose if we get a sand on our hand. Now let me move to the next slide. Ways to decrease friction. Now as you can see here, we can put oil and get the faster the cycle. Then applying oil means a sound will be coming on. In doors and all, some old doors and all, you may didn't notice that it will be sound coming like that sound will come now. So prevent that, they will apply oil. Now polishing the surface. In this, you can, if you polish the surface means the prevent will be going very fast and the friction will be very slow. As we go over here, the friction will be very slow, and this is why they polish their surface. Adding wheels. Adding wheels is a type of rolling friction which slows down the frictions, because rolling friction is always like our tire bus and everything. So more the wheels, more the friction will be very reduced. Using ball bearings. In fidget spinner, you will have been noticed that it will be in the center of it. So what happens means if you spin it like this means If you spin it like this, means the faster the fidget spinner. So they will use ball bearings. I have seen that fidget spinner, inside that cap will be there. Now if let me draw it. See, if the fidget spinner is like this, means inside this there will be this using ball bearings. Now measuring frictional force. For example, if we using a Newton meter or the spring meter, why they used as a spring meter and the Newton meter? Because spring meter was formed by Isaac Newton. So what they can do means, just if we pull, it will show that it's 2 kg. Now in weighing machines and all, in the scale and all, they will use like this. In a vegetable shop also you can see this. And let me move to the next video. Factors affecting friction. What affects the friction? It depends on the nature of the surface in the contact. The rougher the surface, the greater the friction. The force pressing the surface together and the pressing force is the weight. Pushing heavy versus light object prevents the friction. For example, it's an independent area of a contact. This is very important. That means independent of a area of contact means if the place is very independent, the friction also will be very close. If a table is there, let me take a table. A table, a square object is there. This object weighs this. This is a normal force. And here is the friction. So if it be independent, nothing will be there and no forces will be here. Now, which is easier to ride on a bicycle, the floor or the grass? Of course, the floor. Because in floor we doesn't have anything. Because as we told in the last thing, is an independent area of a contact. It equals the smooth surfaces produce less friction. As the road is very smooth, the less will be the friction. The grass is made like this, means your tires going, means it will prevent this, and the friction will be reducing it, and it will be not nice to ride a bicycle on a grass. Now there's a book with a more weight and there's a table. The book is less weight and there's a table. A harder pushes need a heavier book. Now the force will attack the book. Now the force of friction, of course, it will be in the opposite direction as it goes. If put it like this. Now the force acting on the book and it will be opposing in the direction. If a force is moving, for example, let me take a box. If a box is over here means, if I push it means the friction will be opposite to it. So this is what is friction. The depends on the friction of the surface of the press together. The small push, the lower the friction. The higher the push, the higher the friction. Now friction doesn't depend on the surface of the earth because it doesn't depend on the anything. If it box is over here also, say gives the same length, but it affects on the mass. It affects on the mass. Then the weight. Mass and weight are the same, and it affects on the mass and the weight. Now let me discuss this one. Friction is the Pablo, weighted the force meter. So if the friction is going over here, the friction will be over here. Then the friction will be down means it will go up only. Now here is the thing. Pablo added another weight to a block, so that weighted 25 Newton. And so it was weighted 25 Newton. What was the 10 Newton result to the table, right? Now as you can see, here is a multiple. that he added 25 Newton, means let me write 25. Then the frictional force was that 10 Newton. Add the result, that means we can add it as 25. Then it will be 2 means it will be, so the correct answer will be 8 only. Now on the grid below, the graph of the published result, the same only will come for here and here. And here's how to do it. Now today we have seen the types of friction, and it depends on how to decrease friction and how to increase friction, then the disadvantages of the friction and the advantages of the friction, then types of the friction, then what is friction. Thank you guys. Let me see you in the next video. Bye bye.